Hi everyone, this is Melos Han-Tani with another how to make video game music with Melos, which is me. So today's video is about Pastel Horizon, the song from Anodyne 2, and it will be probably pretty long, so there will be timestamps below. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, or join our Discord, follow us on Twitter, any of that stuff. And of course, if you have any questions from this video, feel free to ask them below or make suggestions of songs for me to talk about in the future. Yeah, so without any further ado, I'm going to be writing down timestamps for myself later. But I wanted to talk a bit about the color coding guideline going here. I'm trying to practice this for all the videos. So red, which is this, I'm calling that diamond lead melody, which is maybe kind of confusing. And that just basically means the main melody of a certain part of the song, usually, or the main focus. I've also got pink, which I'm calling the gold lead. It might serve a response, and I call and response role. It could be like another melody that's a little bit more quiet or less in the way. There's some colors that this song does not use. There's a seafoam color that the previous video on C Note used, which is more of something that could be a melody depending on context. What else? We have light blue. This. And what the light blue is kind of a harmonic accompaniment to the piece. So it's something that's not a melody on its own, but it helps to emphasize the mood or emotion of a certain part of the song. We also have dark blue, like here. Dark blue is a rhythmic harmonic accompaniment, meaning it's something that's an instrument, but also serves a rhythmic role to kind of define rhythm or the pacing energy of the song. Like that kind of has kind of like a drum sort of feel to it, but it is also chords. Next we have yellow, which I'm defining as my pads. A pad is just a long sustained sound that is often layered to be a chord, and it often has an atmospheric role or to help reinforce the mood more or give a texture to the song's atmosphere. And then we don't have any of this in this song, but there's a light purple color, which I did use in C Note, which I'm calling a harmonic texture. And light purple it's something it's kind of like an ambient sound, but it's made with a synth, and it's not quite fuzzy or noisy enough to be considered a recording that you took outside in nature. It's something you made in the synthesizer, and it kind of has a more artificial feel to it. Green is bass line. There's actually no bass line in this song. Some stuff could be considered a bass line, but I didn't put it in here. But green and purple, those colors are in the C Note song if you want to look at that. Then we have white, which is ambient textures, so like field recordings. On the field recordings. Then we have brown, which is our percussion. So I have a darker brown for lower frequency sounds, like a kick drum. And then I also have a lighter brown for higher frequency percussion, like this plasticky metal sound. Yeah, so that covers the colors. I know my timestamp here. 48. Okay, so first we want to talk about Pastel Horizon. We need to talk about the origin of the song. So originally for this area, and I'll, let me throw up some art. Okay, you can look at that. So there's already a strong visual concept for this area, Pastel Horizon and Anodyne 2, and I wrote a lot of it before I did the music and before I put the level design in. So even though there wasn't concept art until I believe after the music was done, like concept art from Marina, who does the art for our games, I was still able to have a strong visual concept in mind, which is necessary for writing the song. Yeah. So I can talk about it here. Yeah, so I can talk about the mood board a little bit here. Put that in my outline. So if you look at the mood board here, the background is it's a cloud area from a game called Baten Kaitos for the GameCube. It has a lot of great painted backgrounds. There's also a picture of like a pink salt flats, so I guess where they make salt in some parts of the world, the water is very clear and it also turns like pink or something. There's also Yume Nikki, which has like a pink ocean area. I didn't put a picture of that in there. But generally, the kind of adjectives we're going for are kind of like dreamy, afterlife, spirits, ghosts, lost connections, redemption, solitude, the sublime, pink, sunset, evening, those kinds of words. Yeah. So a random thing about, actually I should talk about this later. Sorry, editing on the fly. Yeah, so when you talk about the narrative concept for the area, this will be kind of detailed, but generally the area of Pastel Horizon, and let me put the picture back up there. Maybe there should be a picture of Pastel Horizon. Let me grab that. Yeah, so the area of Pastel Horizon is generally about people who die without connections, my idea of afterlife, thinking about people who don't have a lot of community or family or friends when they die and what happens to them. And what that's kind of influenced by is in Taiwan there's kind of a notion of wild ghosts. And every summer there is a kind of like a holiday period where you offer food and gifts to your ancestors. Actually, you do this quite frequently throughout the year, but in particular in the summer, there's a thing that people do where you offer stuff to people who don't have any ancestors to offer food to them. And that kind of helps so that these quote wild or homeless ghosts are okay as well. So this part of the game isn't, I guess, religious in that sense, but it's kind of using that as a jumping off point to think about kind of social relations and communities. It's also about the idea of moving between places across the world, leaving social networks to enter other social networks, giving certain things up in exchange for other sorts of things on the level of social connections. It's also about how community can create meaning for people outside of traditional notions of entertainment. For instance, the people on the southern island in Pastel Horizon, they live isolated from, say, the things in the world that we enjoy, but even then, by themselves, they still manage to have a meaningful existence for themselves. There's also a little bit in the area about isolated people and how people might view them as self-created victims versus victims of kind of societal conditions. How people might shift the blame on a person for being the way they are versus how kind of social conditions can create particular behavioral issues in a person. And so those are the general ideas of the area, right? Yeah. So with that in mind, I did the writing, and then I was able to kind of think about influences for the music. Timestamp. So next, we're going to talk about the influences for the song. So I have a VLC player ready. very prepared today. Okay, so the first and probably most obvious influence we need to talk about is Fields from Anodyne 1. So let me play the first part of Fields. That's not Fields. So that main melody of Fields, I actually kind of wanted this song to be a very loose remix of Fields and the emotions it has from Anodyne 1, because Pastel Horizon is a very large area. So here at this melody. Oh. That kind of roughly represents. Sounds like the original Fields. This part right here also resembles this. Okay, maybe not too much, but that's why I say like loose remix. It's kind of fun to reimagine your past influences. There's also influence later in the piece that I'll talk about later in this video. But let's talk about a few more influences. Okay, one of them is this song called Odd Man Hypothesis by Jun Chikuma. She did the music for Bomberman Hero. That's one of her well-known game soundtracks, but she's actually a prolific musician. She does a lot of like acoustic stuff too. And this song, let's go to the part that's relevant. 43. I want you to listen to kind of the pauses, the dramatic pauses in this song. So there's a lot of nice pauses and kind of like mallet sounds in there. And I was listening to the song a lot just at the time, and I think that helped. It was kind of an influence on how I approached this section of the song. Trouble today. Okay. Another thing that influenced that was this song. I'll play like 3 seconds of it. Hopefully I don't get copyright struck because I think that song is particularly but Ichi Sakamoto's Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. At at 0:55, there's also a similar kind of like dramatic like pause between some of the synths. Oh, not that part. Listen to the like that, the synths in the background. That kind of like building up to an interesting like stab. There's also the Anodyne 1. So in Anodyne 1, you might recognize these sound effects. Those are the guys in the blue cave dungeon early in the game who kind of walk around and like talk to themselves. And I like that idea of having a live recording in the song. So I found this 3-chord sample right here in the song. You can't actually see what I'm working on, but let me play the original. So Pastel Horizon, the area, it's kind of about like ghosts and lots of people underlying the ocean. Like the idea is that the ocean kind of has a lot of these like spirits and stuff in the area. So I wanted to represent that with a recording of a food court, which is like a lot of people talking. Is what these sounds are right here, and you can especially tell. You can hear it like right there. And that's just a nice way to kind of fill out the ambience of the song. What else? Okay. I don't have a recording of it because I think Studio Ghibli is pretty particular, but in Spirited Away, the song One Summer's Day, at the very beginning, there's kind of like a piano motif that's just by itself, and like some of the notes are kind of like repeated. And if you heard the song, you know what I'm talking about. But that was maybe one of the influences for how I approached some of the piano at the end of the song, like right here. It's not exactly a quote from Spirited Away, but it's similar in sort of the approach of the staccato and the repeated notes. Other things that could have influenced it are the song Seeming Sad from Travis Strikes Again. I'm not sure the composer. At 1:35. Hearing those like staccato repeated notes. Another really good influence, I think, is Masashi Hamauzu's Saga Frontier 2 soundtrack. He has a lot of great songs in there, but in particular these three. I want you to listen to the staccato around 30 seconds in this song that I can't pronounce. I think it's a German name. I like the staccato there a lot. Staccato being a very short, quick note. There's a here for you. This next song, the melody around 10. I like that piano sound because it's not a realistic piano. It's sampled, but it's like it only has one kind of expression to it, so it sounds sort of fake, and that can be a nice effect. Or it also has a nice melody. So I like how he approaches piano throughout all his music, but especially these earlier soundtracks. For percussion, maybe I'm not really sure, but the idea with not that idea. Like right here. There's this cool song by Kinesthesia called Tomb, and it has a really neat percussion stuff going on. Yeah, so that could have been something. Lastly, I like a lot of the use of there's a song called Look at Me by Oh Hee-jung. Let me go to, where is it? I like how there's a lot of accompaniment harmonies bouncing around here. So that has also a nice kind of otherworldly feeling to it because of all the synths and delays on the synths. So those were all various influences. And then one last one is Ghost Bridge by Susumu Hirasawa, which influenced not really the music, but more of the tone of the writing and the tone of the area thematically. Yeah, that's a really good song. These are all great songs, so you should listen to the whole song legally somehow. Yeah, so that covers the influences. Alright, so we can finally talk about the song, right? I just wanted to be pretty explicit about everything going on here. So let's just listen through the song one time. So the song kind of has various sections to it. Get some notes up on top here, but in the beginning, let's just listen and I'll talk about it. The first part of the song is kind of an idea of like ghosts kind of drifting around, being very lonesome, like murmuring beneath the waves, setting kind of the bass ambience for the whole song, setting up the mood. Okay, so that was part one of the song. Part two is sort of like a sense of melancholy, sense of despair, sort of a dramatic flourish that welcomes in the more memorable part of the song. So I guess the imagery here is, I don't know, ghosts going around, being very like emotional. Yeah, and then the third part of the song is the melody there. The third part of the song is, I guess, people living, kind of honoring these ghosts or helping them through the afterlife, present day stuff. Sort of what Nova does in the game, right, with those two ghosts. And the fourth part of this song is sort of redemption for the ghost, finding community, a sense of positivity, a sense of like resting in peace, which is why it's more cheery, more like happy. And then lastly, we have the loop. I'm going to go ahead and just show you these chords in case you want to grab those. Ending chords on the mallets. The third section, these chords. Maybe I should just release the MIDIs for these or something. Here. And then we also have these chords here. For arpeggios. Right, so that's an overview of the song. Now we can talk about the song in more detail. Let's start with the first section, right? So what's going on here is first we have these crowds rising up, and I'll get into the sound design of these later, but basically they're a pitched down I'll talk about it later. So in the very beginning, we have a sparse melody here. This kind of sounds like a drifting ghost or whatever. We also have this melodic mallet playing right here to drive the chords and kind of drive the rhythm of the section. But because the sound of the ghost is a little bit annoying, I pass the melody down to a lower sound down here. That sound is also very ghostly, but it's kind of helps the ear not get tired from hearing a high sound. We also have a kick drum going on, which helps to give a slight kind of heartbeat to the song, but not be overwhelming. I didn't want to be too loud. Lastly, we have these this like plastic metal sound. Kind of helps add a little bit of mysterious texture to the ghostliness, emphasizes the ghostliness of this part of the song. Lastly, this section, the chords change a bit to welcome the more melancholic part. They build towards that drama that's about to release. Right. Then the second part, the melancholic part here. So what's going on here? We have a lot of instruments going here. Let's ignore the... Okay. So it starts first with a synth stab, and then we hear like a bell sound, followed by a piano, and then a little bit of a response melody with this sine bell over here. And then to build up to the repeat of this, we have the plastic metal kind of playing something. And look at the wave here. This wave food court sound, it builds up at the same time this thing builds up, and that kind of helps as a like a build to a quote-unquote drop. So this is, I guess this is ghost dubstep or something, I don't know. Yeah. The reason you have so many different sounds is it gives a kind of dramatic sense. If you go back to those influences I was talking about, there's a lot of pause between those sounds. So it's kind of the person listening is waiting for what's going to happen. And that's also why we ended up using this in the trailer for the game. There's kind of a lot of different kinds of sounds and voices moving around separately here. Yeah, so the next part 3, quite straightforward. The melody is from Anodyne 1 Fields. It's fun to remix your own work and remix it very loosely. I like to do that a lot. We have these pads right here that sound kind of like crystally and mysterious. This panning rubber sign. It's a very major, positive, kind of hopeful mood. And that will help when we're going to transition to the next section here. Kind of help set up that kind of mood transition. The plastic metal, this just is kind of for texture. It also helps define some of the rhythm of the part. And it helps that like driving sort of onwards rhythm without having too strong percussion in the song. Yeah. And then throughout this, we also still have the food court ambience going on. And those are just to kind of, those add to keep the whole mix of the song a little bit more whole, a little bit more complete. Yeah. There's not much to say. I guess the melody here is a little bit kind of emotional, dramatic, longing. Especially this sort of like, I just want to talk about this, kind of like triplet, transitioning to the end of a measure. That's a very like dramatic thing you can do from like, I don't know, it can be kind of cheesy actually, but I think it was okay. The panning rubber sign here, it's just taking a chord, like sevenths or ninths or something, one of those like standard chords, and then just arpeggiating them in a melodic kind of way to fill the atmosphere of the song more. Moving on, we have this kind of redemption section, which is here. And those staccatos, you know, they're influenced by the piano stuff I talked about, but also that staccato gives a sense of playfulness, lightheartedness. It's kind of like all the sad drama at the beginning of the song is finally transformed into something more positive. Going back to Fields, I'll play it here. Wooden Fields. So listen to the melody here. And that's kind of what I was going at with the sine bell part here. It's referencing Fields a bit, incorporating that melody in there. It's a nice counter melody. As you can see, it's in pink, so I'm treating it as kind of a sub-response melody. And then the sine bell actually becomes the main melody in the second part. So, you know, just because you have one instrument doesn't mean you have to treat it as the lead melody all the time. You can also change the context of the song and change, you know, whether you want it to be more prominent or less prominent. What's going on with this wavy brightness here, right? So this section of the song is in a major key, but this F, I think it's from the relative minor or something, some music term like that. But basically, most songs are in like one key, and there's also various keys that are close to it, theoretically. And so if you want to impart a little bit of extra kind of like dramatic emotion, you can have a set of chords that go from these like positive ones, and you can hit in between something that's a little bit more negative. And this sounds weird on its own, but if it's just in between two chords, then when someone's listening, that context lets it be more of like a dramatic flourish rather than like, oh, like a very bad sounding note. Yeah. Else? Okay, the percussion. I gotta talk about the percussion going on here. So there's 3 things to talk about, which is actually this part here. That lower pitch plastic metal, it kind of creates movement in the song with the rhythm by kind of like driving how the listener should be interpreting everything. We also have this fast plastic metal still going on, and that helps to move the song more towards a energetic, frantic mood. Of course, we have this arpeggiating mallet still, which is just arpeggiating the chords of the song. Arpeggiating meaning playing the notes of the chord one by one, instead of like all at once. Yeah, so this information is important for the song because if we take it out, let's take out this. There's less of a sense of rhythm. Without this, there's even less energy. And of course, without any chords or like rhythmic chords at all, there's a very like the song feels kind of weirdly empty. There's no mood, motion to it. much else to talk about in this section. Basically, what's going on here, this piano gets lower, because we're trying to transition to the loop of the song. Then lastly, in the final part of the section, we're going to loop back to the start of the song. So we want to bring back some of the melodic content. So we're going to bring back that ghostly kind of sound, like that. We're also bringing back the chords, the arpeggiating chords from the mallet in the beginning. And those all help to make the loop a bit more seamless. So what's going on in this fourth section is also transitioning to that loop. Potentially this could have gone on for longer, but I chose to make it shorter. Yeah, okay. So, I'm going to take a quick break and pause the video, and then come back and talk about sound design. Okay, so, where were we? Sound palette and graphics are important. I just want to talk generally about when you have a game of pixel art, you don't necessarily need it to sound like a Game Boy or Game Boy Advance. Early in Anodyne 2's OST, I was doing that a little bit, like especially the earlier areas. Those sound more like you could hear them on a DS or Game Boy Advance, but I realized kind of that people don't really care about the fidelity of the music matching the quote fidelity of the art. So you can kind of use whatever you want. Ultimately, it doesn't matter as long as the music's good. Unless you're really going for like an authentic kind of like emulation of a particular era, which we're not in Anodyne 2. We're kind of just scrapping together all various sorts of art styles and periods into the game. Yeah, so that's why this song has a lot of kind of like real piano, quote unquote. Right, so let's talk a bit about the sound design. Okay, first, this ghostly sound. There's a sample I like to use. I use it a lot in Anodyne. It's called Brightness High. It's part of this Ultimate Mega Drive sound font. And I used it a lot in Anodyne 1. It has a really nice kind of like warm, interesting frequency to it. So to make the ghostly sound, I sampled the sound, but I used a very high attack, just so I don't get that beginning like very sharp attack hit. Then also some modulation to change the volume and pitch. And you could do that if you wanted to, but that just makes it feel ghostly. The balafon, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, sorry. So there's a nice synthesizer called Collision in Ableton Live, which you can use to synthesize percussive sounding mallets and stuff that resonate off of like beams or like surface or like membranes and poles and that kind of stuff. So I used that to make this kind of like melody sound that still sounds a little bit metally and kind of has some like inharmonic sounds in there to make it feel a bit more ghostly. And I did that, and this is a great way to make sounds with a synthesizer. Is just to find a preset in the synthesizer. On Ableton, you could just oh, I realize my face is blocking some of this. But in Ableton Live, you can just listen through presets, find something that's kind of close to what you want, but maybe not all the way there, and then you can edit it. You can edit the preset by changing the synth. So this is the one. I started with this, but I wanted to make it a little bit less metally. So you can change a few things, like the quality of the emulation of like the physical realness. So by making it less quality, it actually can make it sound different. Various other settings you can just play with. Like right now the sound has a lot of white noise in it, so you can just get rid of that. And by doing that, you can start with that preset, and then now we get that nice sound here. Yeah, and then I also use that same preset for these sounds here. But in this case, the sound is a lot closer to the original, I think. Sort of. Anyways, the point is, you can change presets to get a lot of interesting sounds. Not quite sure what's going on with this one, actually. I think it's because the sound is very low. Yeah, if you can kind of hear that. At a very low frequency, it's there's like the emulation of the sound is not working correctly, so it has interesting kind of artifacts. The food court sound. The sample is being, where are we? It's being sampled, but also being pitched down. You can see here, I'm pitching it down, but we're also passing it through some delay. This compressor, I don't think this is actually doing anything. Yeah, it's not. But that's how you can take the sort of timbre or the qualities of a crowd talking and then pitch it down, and it's not recognizable as a crowd, but it can still feel kind of like a crowd. And then like right here, I didn't pitch the sample down, I just gave it a very high attack so that you have to wait to hear it build up. So the food court kind of sounds like a wave. I want to talk about the sine bell right here. Actually, I want to talk about it not there, but when I was using it over here. This is a very simple use of Ableton Live Operator. You can change the partials of a sound. So what does that mean? Well, if you look at the EQ, which shows the frequency spectrum of a sound, it's kind of like a fairly straightforward sine wave sound with a few things added. You'll notice that there's like peaks of the sound here, but when I add back these partials, there's a little bit extra stuff going on, and it has a kind of like a slight tinny quality to it, and that can change what the sound feels like. Crystal pad right here. So for this, I sampled a electric piano from the Sega Genesis. I like the ending of the sound, but not the beginning. So I cut out the beginning by increasing the attack. I lower it. Oh. It's much more of a sustained pad kind of sound. Did I do anything else? I think I didn't do anything else to it. I just added some reverb. The sound itself already has a lot of interesting quality to it, so it sounds even nicer when you thicken it out with some reverb. Panning rubber sign right here. So, okay, first we have delay on here. EQ is not doing anything. Delay is just good for like spreading the sound around the whole song, while still getting the frequencies that you want without it being kind of too like stabby and deliberate. or like isolated. This is also a very simple patch. All I did was I added some feedback, which makes the sound modulate itself, which usually has the effect of kind of like thickening out the sound a bit. So if I don't have any feedback versus having feedback, I think it makes the sound a little bit more like rubbery. I also added a little bit of partials here. It's not that noticeable actually. It might not actually be noticeable at all, but the feedback here is doing a lot. We also have an LFO changing the panning. The panning, or panorama, is, I think it's panorama, is kind of what side of the stereo spectrum, so left to right, the sound is playing in. And one way to kind of spread a sound around atmospherically is to have the sound pan from left to right. So all I'm doing here is I have a sine LFO, which means the value is going to change like a sine wave might. I have it synced to the tempo of the song, and then I have that mapped to changing the panorama. Just so like every beat or something like that, it'll move the thing in sync with the song. Yeah. Another thing to talk about is the, where are we? Crystally staticky wavetable. This is only used once in the song. But you can see that even though the stab occurs at the very beginning of this effect, this whole, or this little passage, that kind of like staticky, fuzzy tail of the sound goes on through almost the whole passage. And the way I did that is by using Ableton Live's wavetable. Wavetable, so I'm going to explain what wavetables are. They're basically every sound is like a wave, standing wave, and you can have a collection of these waves, and you can modulate through them to change what the sound is. I can do that. But you can also map certain things to change the position that this wavetable is being sampled from. So in my case, I'm creating an envelope here, which has a very late, it doesn't do anything until the sound is released. My hand is not in the frame. What that means is that when this sound ends, this envelope will start to move upwards and change the position of the wavetable being sampled from. And so at the bottom of the wavetable, the sounds are a lot more kind of like siney and less staticky. But up here, they're a lot more harsh. So the idea is that when the sound is tailing off, I'm going to move the wavetable upwards, and that will make it so the tail of the sound kind of has a nice like staticky texture. And by having a delay, we also ensure that the staticky tail is going to be spread over time a little bit longer. But other than that, it's a pretty simple patch. Shimmer, this is a nice thing that wavetable does. It just thickens out the sound in certain ways. And lastly, we have these little sliders here. I like wavetable a lot because it's very simple, but you can do things like use frequency modulation to change the sound. So like if I change the tune. So you can actually change this to anywhere from -100 to 100%. I think you actually have 2,000 values it can be set at. And the amount is how strong the effect is. Of course, those are too strong for what we need right now. Sorry if that blew your ears out. But what's cool is that because you can set this to like 10.1, or I guess just, this can be 100 values. And this can be 2,000 values. That gives you 200,000 values that you can use. And you can also modulate between them too. So there's a lot of possibility in just these settings, which is cool. Lastly, I use a lot of piano in this, right? Like here. This sample, weirdly enough, it's just a sampled piano. For some reason it's from a KK Slider sound font. I don't really understand why. Like, you have like the, where's the sounds? But for some reason it also comes with piano samples. And I like those piano samples because they're not high quality. They sound kind of like, they sound fine in context, but they don't sound as realistic as like a real sample or professional sample library. But yeah, we could totally just like, no. We could do something like just replace it with the dog or whatever. Whoa, okay, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. That's actually the end of the video. Yeah, so if you have any comments or anything or questions, feel free to ask below. I'll probably keep uploading these. They're kind of fun to do. Thanks for watching, and like, comment, and subscribe, and follow us on Twitter and Discord, and buy and play our games. This has been Melos Han-Tani with another Music with Melos. Thanks for watching.